Okay, so it's all the origin stories all the time this week. I know I've been a little bit behind with my reviews, but I was working 11 days out of 12 and I'm trying to catch up. So, as always, I'm Al, this is the Geek in Review, and I'm going to be talking about Star Trek Prodigy Season 1, Episode 16. And we get a lot of background answers and questions here for a lot of the gang, but we also get a few. So, what are they going to do now that they've done that? And I'll get to that later on in the video. But while I liked what we got background-wise for the Diviner, the rest of the stories with Rock Talk, Zero and Pog felt a little bit flat to me, and I'll get to that later on. But first, what's going on? Well, Janeway's stuck behind the fence of the neutral zone with a spy on board, and she's got questions about who exactly was after the Protostar and the crew. But of course, she's puzzled as to why they aren't answering the hails, because, you know, there's a weapon on board, and we know it as the audience, but she doesn't know it. I've mentioned it all in the old reviews. Just go back and watch them, and also like and subscribe. So on board the ship, yeah, Dal's back to being a little bit of a dick after learning his origin, and yeah, that did surprise me, the stuff we learned about Dal last week, but it was more surprising is some of the stories that we get with the crew here. And speaking of origins, the first one up to bat is Rock Talk, who was sort of a gladiator, and yeah, I was kind of shocked about that too. But it was more of a pro wrestling thing because it was all an act, not like Russell Crowe or anything like that. But like most actors, she got sick of it and decided that she wanted another role. Maybe she should have tried some off-Broadway stuff rather than rethinking the positions and her not being the monster and trying to be the sort of champion or saviour. And it turns into a more Laurel and Hardy routine than gladiatorial combat. So I get why the crowd weren't going for it, but they spent far too much time telling this part of the story. And man, I'm going to say this a few times in this episode, did the guy that she was fighting ever look like he was out of a Star Wars cartoon? But anyway, that's Rock Talk out the way. So what about Zero? He was just doing the space jellyfish thing before he got caught and was handed over, and I liked her little ship. I think that appeared in an episode of the original series when the Medusans were in it. But yeah, why have they got a ship if they can just float about space? Anyway. So after he gets captured by the Kazon, he goes straight to the Diviner, and yeah, the Kazon keep popping up everywhere this season, but we still don't know exactly where we are or where the crew is. So again, a lot of questions about where the Kazon are and what they're up to. And next up for the flashback treatment is Jankum Pog, who's kind of one of my favourite characters in the show. And it turns out that he's really old, and I mean really old, and he's not the only one. I'll get to that later on. He was frozen for spaceflight before the Federation even existed, so technically he's over 200 years old. But Tellarites freezing kids and then hurling them into space, is it just me or does that seem a bit harsh? But yeah, if you've not seen the episode and you've seen the Chris Pratt film Passengers, it's basically that story, and I mean, it's an exact rip-off of that. He's the only one that wakes up and he's got to sort of repair the ship, and the only thing he's got for companionship is a robot that keeps forgetting his name. So that's why he refers to himself in the third person all the time, because the robot keeps asking his name. And I was a little bit disappointed in this, although it was a bit more interesting than I thought. I was hoping we're going to learn that, you know, maybe his love of engineering came out the fact that he had to build his own arm or something like that. Yeah, I wasn't really expecting a Passengers rip-off of the Jankum Pog backstory. And basically the way he gets captured is he's put in a sort of bind of you can either save yourself or the rest of the crew will die, or sacrifice yourself and they'll live. So he hurls himself into space in an escape pod. You can see where this is going, gets caught by the Kazon, blah blah blah, etc, etc. But I like how they did sort of give him some background with his engineering about why he's so into it and why he thinks it's so important. The rest of the characters, they've not really done anything like that so far, so although we get a few origin stories here, we've not got the complete picture yet. There's still room to, dare I say it, improve them. But what about the Diviner? He still doesn't know who he is. And we get his flashback here. We see how his people met the Federation in Starfleet. They basically showed up and their presence divided society between those who wanted to join them and those that didn't, causing a pretty bloody civil war. And Starfleet, just being Starfleet, just left them to it. That is, until the Protostar shows up from the future with Chakotay on board having fallen out a temporal anomaly. So yeah, that's that explained as well. But again, it raises more questions because we see him send the ship back. So is he still stuck in the future? And he sent the ship back without a crew, so where are they? You know, are they going to catch up time-wise and we're going to meet Chakotay when he's much older, or is he going to find another way back? There's a lot that could happen here, and I like that they didn't try and fully answer or close the door on that. But the weapon that they had on board is what caused the Protostar to sort of get thrown out of time from where it was supposed to be. And the Diviners people, in all their wisdom, send 100 ships back throughout time to try and find it. And man, all the galaxy and all of time to try and find one ship, that's a pretty small needle in a pretty huge haystack. But hey, it's a kid's cartoon. They've got no sense of how big the universe is or time, so it doesn't matter. We also learn that the ensign that isn't an ensign is actually called the Vindicator. Arrived after the Diviner. He's been in this timeline for about 20 years, but for her it's been less than 10. So we do see him as a younger man in this episode, and man, has he aged a lot in a couple of decades. Time travel must be very hard, or that prison planet was just harsh. And I do hope that they give us a little bit more about what life was like on the Diviner's planet. Let's say, out of all the origin stories in this episode, the Diviners is my favourite, but it still wasn't as fully developed as much as I'd like. And yeah, I know I keep saying it's a kid's cartoon, so I've got to let it off the hook. But I enjoy this show so much that my expectations for it are high. And while these origin stories aren't exactly what I'd hoped they would be, it was good enough, I suppose, in terms of the long-term plot. But it does end on a massive cliffhanger when Janeway walks in on the Diviner and the Vindicator, and they do what baddies do and knock her out. So I suppose they're going to take her hostage. Maybe one of them might impersonate her. They're definitely going to try and take over the Dauntless, so I'm looking forward to seeing where that's going. But what is his long-term move going to be? That's what I'm wondering. Because surely when the gang find out what's going on, they're going to try and stop him and save Janeway. I think that would be a good arc for the rest of the season. But yeah, at times this show is feeling more Star Wars-y than Star Trek. Let's say the guy that Rock Talk was fighting and the robot that was on board Jankum Pog's ship felt more like they'd been placed in a Clone Wars cartoon than a Star Trek cartoon. Is that just me? Let me know in the comments below. I don't think it's necessarily a bad criticism because the Clone Wars was a very popular show. But Star Wars and Star Trek have always been in this Cold War battle, and at the moment I don't think either franchise is doing particularly well. And that's what I think, so you know, if you're a fan of either franchise or both or neither, well, if you're a fan of neither, why are you watching this video? But these are my opinions, so just deal with it. Just any way you want to, just deal with it that way. Not a great episode, and again I think that is because I'm enjoying the show so much. I was hoping for more. I was hoping it was going to be a little bit more complex, or maybe even left a mystery, but again, it's a kid's show and still for my money the best Star Trek show that's on TV at the moment. But if you think this was a good Star Trek episode, let me know in the comments below, and if you think this was a good Star Trek episode review, leave a like on the video and subscribe. If you've made it this far, thanks for watching. My name's Al.